It's an evolution. The thing about branding is that it's living, breathing with you. You are your brand, even if you don't have a logo or nothing. You are your brand. And it's going to breathe and grow and change and shift until sometime you're like, okay, I've clearly outgrown this and I need a solution.
This is Rebel Therapist, a podcast for entrepreneurs who are trained as therapists and who want to level up their businesses, make a bigger impact, feel fulfilled, and be very well paid. I'm your host, Annie Schusler. This week, I brought in the branding goddess who's helped me with Rebel Therapist, Jenny Ambrose of Puree Fantastico. She's here to tell you that branding is probably not what you think it is. Branding is a way to express who you are, what you do, and even express what it feels like to work with you. Good branding goes deep. Good branding is not this weird superficial thing off to the side in your business. It integrates everything. Branding includes everything from your logo, fonts, colors, images, the name of your business, the name of your offers, your messaging. It's a lot. In this conversation with Jenny, we talk about my experiences working with her and how my own understanding of branding evolved during that process. She also gives us some good ideas about how to get started with branding on your own and how to figure out when it might be a good time to hire a pro. This was a special episode in a couple ways. For the first time, I invited my clients to participate in the recording, and I loved including them, and you're going to hear some of their questions and comments. The other way this is special and different is that usually I interview people who are therapists or who are in very similar fields so we can learn from their actual lived experiences in their businesses. I don't usually bring in experts to talk about running your business. But I made an exception because I really wanted you to hear from Jenny. I brought in an expert one other time in one of my very first episodes with web designer Kat Love. So maybe that means I do this like every 2 years or so. Okay, let's jump into the conversation with Jenny Ambrose, an entrepreneur and the founder and owner of Puree Fantastico. Welcome, Jenny Ambrose. Thank you so much for being here.
The honor is seriously all mine. It feels like a huge gift to be treated as you described me and to have this space to share my vision about branding and how I approach to it. So thank you.
Yay. So why is good branding so important to you, Jenny?
Because I feel like we live in a time that the presentation of self or business is so available to us that we really need to be ethical about using the way that design can communicate or not. And for me, good branding is that. It has ethics, it has integrity, it is what you say it is, the experience is truthful, and that others benefit as you do from portraying yourself in such a way. And it's why I left advertising and started my own business. Because I didn't feel that Tide needed a new microsite or the cotton industry needed new banner ads, but small businesses needed to be able to be empowered and given the support of an art school education over just the agency model. So good branding for me connects people with what you want them to do and feel in a way that is authentic and true.
What do you think? Like when people talk about branding who don't know about branding yet, I think they're not talking about branding. What do you think the difference is between what a lot of times, and this will be true of a lot of us, what do you think people are thinking branding is that's often different than what it is at its best?
It's the superficial, right? It's the things that we can see. It is also the reason why I feel like human beings haven't mastered cloning is because there's elements to what makes a person beyond what we can see and experience. There are things that are inherent in that structure and that entity that me on the outside, I don't know how my brain synapses, like that's not for me, but they happen. So branding for most people is fonts, colors, what it looks like. And branding for me is What are you saying? Who are you saying it to? How are they feeling? What are they taking away from that? Like, it's a lot of abstraction. Those abstractions are represented by fonts and colors and your messaging and what your website looks like and how you greet people. But it all boils down to, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? Who are you serving? What's that whole experience like for you, for them? And I think it's deeper.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's a very deep process.
It's psychological and it's uncomfortable and it's completely subjective from person to person. And I don't think we are comfortable with that. There's a lot of external validation and a lot of shoulds. The only should is, does this resonate with what you're doing and what you want to say about it? If yes, then should, correct, excellent, doing it right. If not, regroup, redirect, because it's all about you and how you want to portray yourself.
So in so many ways, there's a similarity to the process of really good, deep branding and what we're doing in my programs. It's just that in my programs, we barely touch on the visual because I'm not an expert in it. And so people are working on it, but it's not the center. The center is more about messaging and, and writing and the other ways that people are going to get that message out there. But I just love how much similarity there is into the deep process of figuring this stuff out.
Well, it's conscious creation of a self, right? So I totally see the similarities because we do this without thinking. Like, okay, so I got dressed for this. I'm a pretty bold person and I'm like, yeah, stripes. But this is a choice I'm making because I know myself. With branding, there seems to be this strange limitation because there's all this expectation and I want to be professional. So there isn't that free form of, ooh, that looks good. I'm going to take that. This is delicious. I like this flavor. So the things that we do naturally for ourselves somehow become so challenging and cumbersome when we feel like we should do it separately for our business. It's actually the same thing. It's just you're doing it at 30, 40, 50 when you've been doing it for 50 years naturally as a person your entire life.
You mean like figuring out who you are?
Yeah, and what you like and having the chutzpah to be okay with whatever you come up with in that discovery journey. And it's true. I mean, when I've worked with clients, I've had clients think of their business as a person. How old are they? What's their name? What do they like? What do they look like? Where would you find them? And sometimes that character development really helps people understand who their brand is in that way. I've even had people go take pictures of their closets, be like, okay, you clearly like the color blue. And that's what, because people take it for granted. So the similarities there are very present for me.
Well, when you and I worked together and you helped me with my branding and my pivot to Rebel Therapist, one thing that was interesting was that my logo for my podcast artwork before that had been all bright colors. And that was because I wanted the podcast to be fun. I wanted it to feel comfortable and happy for people. And so I thought, well, that's bright colors. But then when you and I worked on the pivot and really felt into, well, what is Rebel Therapist? And who are you, Annie, as the person bringing it? We ended up with these like really subtle colors and just a really different vibe. And it does look like my closet for one thing, but also it's now integrated through the whole business. So it's not like, here's my business and now here's my logo. It's like, here's my business, the colors, the fonts, the messaging all feels like it's one thing. And it's integrated with me, and it's integrated with how I want people to feel when they're in my community and all of that.
This is my whole, yup, thank you.
That's your thing.
You had the benefit of being in the class with me. And I think it was like the first or second class, someone said, I have a difficult time bringing all of these separate parts of me together. It's like, you don't leave your left leg in the bathroom and your right hand on your porch. Like, you are one person. You bring your whole self with you all the time. So, and the other thing I wanted to bring up there is like, just because you want something to be fun does not mean it has to be represented in a way that you are expecting, in a way that feels the most obvious right now. The analogy I use, because I'm a giant math nerd, is that there's multiple pathways to 12. Because 6 times 2, 3 times 4, 13 minus 1. There's just a lot of different ways to get to the right solution. And the right solution is different for everybody. So just talking to you, like, your whole image right now is beautifully muted, calm, neutrals, grays. And I'm like, the circus, the visual circus here. But that is true for me. It would be completely disingenuous if I showed up in I have black leggings. I don't even have black Converse. Color, 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 color. So but that is my integration of self, and it's interesting. Sometimes I do feel like a design therapist where it's like, yes, your choice is correct because you are making it for you, your business that you have to wake up and nurture and sit in and love and care about like a child, like yourself. So it's very important to me that the results of me and the client working together, they feel that about it, because it breaks my heart when people are like, I went with this branding designer, but I didn't know how to tell him I didn't like it and it doesn't feel like me and I don't use it. It's like, you put so much emotional investment in that, and it does feel like a complete letdown, which can hinder future endeavors in your business. So I'm sensitive to that.
Yeah. And who are generally your clients? How are they finding you? And like, how big are their businesses usually?
Every single client I have, every single one has found me, either through a Facebook thread I commented on a year ago, or just Google, or I'm recommended to someone. And it's interesting, the clients that I'm attracting now, they all have a vision that they're trying to bring forth. And I would say that's the commonality for me, is somebody with a vision or a dream and they don't know how to do it. They don't know what the steps are. They don't know what that looks like. And it's like, come on, baby. Because for me, my Puree Fantastico, the craft site I'm launching this summer, and then a third project, they're all dreams I've been making from nothing. So I have found sometimes that your niche that you're working with comes from a huge part of you, huge part. All right, I do see a question.
Oh, Naima is just saying, thank you so much for saying all this. So affirming. I thought I was going crazy. It's such a process. I had no idea. Yes, it's such a process. Yes.
And even when you do it for yourself, it's this bizarre existential crisis where I make myself go through my own process. I treat myself like a client. And so you talk about crazy, talk about standing in front of your fridge, having an argument about what font you should use. And it's like, okay, if my neighbors only knew what was really going on. But it's worth it, just like when you do self-discovery or when you go through something, it's that weird chaotic, transformation of caterpillar to cocoon to butterfly.
Yeah.
Rinse and repeat, change the context.
I got an interesting question from someone before the call, which was, I'm curious about the process of branding overall and why it's important. And I feel like we really got into that one. But I'm also curious about the cultural factors with branding. Who are you branding for, and how to adjust for not reinforcing dominant cultural narratives?
Well, that's interesting because I'm a pretty nonconformist human being. And that side says you brand for your damn self, because it doesn't. Okay, let's talk about fashion designers, right? Do you think Betsy Johnson cares about the people shopping at Marc Jacobs? She does not. And Marc Jacobs is not interested in attracting the people from Betsy Johnson. So there is a part that's brand for yourself, feel confident in what you're doing. And as long as you feel connected with it and people are resonating with it in a way that makes you feel heard, this is success. Now, two, you do have to care about the people you want to reach. I mean, if I just started screaming and like banging, I would get some interest, but I don't think I would really get my message across. And so there's that balance between stand there with your badass self, but also try and be a little engaging, even if the engagement is rebellious or non-conformist or confrontational. You will get the right resonance from what you put out. Now, how do you be mindful to, what was it, non-power structures or traditional power structures?
Yeah, so I guess I'm thinking about, and I don't know if this is what the person was getting at, but I'm thinking about how sometimes branding could reinforce things like racism, sexism.
Yep. And that's being mindful. I mean, I'm working on a brand right now and I know her content is polyamory. So there's no way I'm going to go to iStock and be like, haha, Susie and Tom. Like, that's not correct. And so it's just a matter of being mindful and responsible with your choices. And I think this is a beautiful segue. I think that is very lacking in the professional design industry and ridiculously lacking in the Wild West design industry that is on Facebook or Instagram, without the training, without the mindfulness of knowing when you pick an image, what that communicates. When you cut a woman's head off for a movie poster, what does that communicate? And right now, the design industry has no interest. And that's very frustrating for someone who has all the interest in making sure that there is more mindfulness about the type of, like, Dove had an ad where it was for something, and like she took off her shirt. She was a black woman, and she took off her shirt, and then she was a white woman. And it was first, and it's like, are you fucking kidding me? What crazy ass ad agency table did you guys all think this was a good idea? And you know it's all men. I know it's all men. Okay. And that was I walked out of an ad agency job. I had it for 6 months. It is like Mad Men without the fashion. And it is serious. There was a client meeting, and I remember the ad team got like a mirrored table and did baking soda or baking powder and made like Coke lines, and everybody was like, ha ha ha, that's so funny. It's like, you guys, it's not funny. And then I was treated as the fuddy-duddy, and it's like, fine, I'll be the fuddy-duddy. I'll be the fuddy-duddy who cares about the way that we perceive messages and communicate those things. And branding is just the easiest accessible way to talk about that stuff. Because it talks about choices. It talks about messaging.
One thing that you introduced me to during the time when we were working together was looking at archetypes and looking at your brand identity using archetypes. And so for me, like, some things that came out were, and I don't remember exactly what the words we were using, but looking at an identity of being an explorer, not necessarily like me being the explorer, but my work being an exploration and my clients being explorers, and then the sage. And again, not saying I am the sage, I am the Yoda, but that there is that in my business, there's that in me and in my clients. And so that was just so helpful and, again, deep. So can you talk a little bit about how you do that with people in general and how people can be thinking about their identities and how they can bring that in?
It's something that is unchangeable. So you might as well embrace it, because we perpetuate all of us perpetuate the archetypes in our relationships, in our stories, in our work. Okay. Movies are there. Music is there. It just, they are totally cultivated. They sprung up from Jung, who's a psychoanalyst. And my background is in anthropology and design. So for me, using any analogy I can to help people think about visual things in an abstract way is my go-to move. And archetypes are really easy to see how other businesses are using branding beyond the visual choices. So I drive my husband crazy, but we play the "What archetype is this commercial" game.
Ooh,
Yeah, I really do. And it's like, oh, they are trying to sell me on this fantasy. Yeah, go ahead, Gain. So I do. And then, like, if you watch a certain show, I notice a specific type of archetype perpetually marketed for this show. And so it's like, okay, well, that's clearly the demographic market. So people use archetypes to help define choices. Specific people will be turned off by an approach, by word choice, by visuals, by pacing. I mean, some people can't stand chewing, me, but we all have these flavors and these idiosyncrasies. So archetypes is a way to organize them and target them. It's something that I use every time I work with a client strategy, because usually you have an archetype, the client you're trying to reach has an archetype, And then even there's a way to have the archetype and how you reach them. So it becomes the what are you doing? What are you saying? How do you want them to feel in comfortable, recognizable forms? So with the sage is the teacher who shows another way. And it pairs really well with the explorer, which is the freedom to try for another way. So it's you are the guide and your lens is exploratory and your lens shows your guide and the podcast shows your authority. So all of these choices in your business support those archetypes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's true, you wouldn't have to define those archetypes, but it's easy to say, well, this is my framing device. This is how I know I like to work. This is how I know my clients enjoy working with me. So a workshop dealing with something in here or something in here is easy. That makes sense. And so it helps with future growth.
Knowing who you are really clearly and what your business is helps with future growth.
And you can change your archetype. I mean, it's an evolution. The thing about branding is it's living, breathing with you. You are your brand, even if you don't have a logo or nothing. You are your brand.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to breathe and grow and change and shift until sometime you're like, okay, I've clearly outgrown this and I need a solution.
Okay, that's exciting. I think that's exciting for people to know that they already have a brand. And so this isn't about creating one, it's about exploring it, communicating it.
Pulling it forth like a geode. I feel the imagery of a geode is like it's a rough rock and then you open it and it's like this magical crystal world and you never would have thought of it, but it's cultivated from you and for time and pressure and
Yeah. Well, so okay, here's a tension point I think a lot of therapists are dealing with. Like let's say maybe before they're ready for a whole process. I think back to where I was before I worked with you and I knew a lot about who I was and what I was doing, but I really had no idea how to express it visually.
Mm-hmm.
What are some steps that people can take to start discovering that visually?
Maybe being curious about visuals. So I'm creative, but I don't feel like I'm a photographer. But having to be on Instagram forces you to change that real quick. And now I find myself more open to taking cute little snapshots of something. So one of the things I always tell my clients is Pinterest. Passive, it's boring on a Saturday afternoon. Pinterest, and just be greedy. Pull things for no reason, just because you like them. If it's a sunrise, if it's a parachute, it doesn't matter. And the more you get comfortable with the things that you like without judging them or finding a use for them, the more comfortable you will be when you're looking at stuff and thinking, man, is this the shoe for me? There's just a whole other step. So just make it easy and fun. And then when it becomes less cumbersome or less judgmental, you can start thinking about why you picked something. Why are you drawn to this? Is it just cause, or is it the color? Is it the way it reminds you of sitting at your grandma's coffee table? Think about why. And once you get into that space and you're comfortable with liking what you like and perhaps knowing why, you can then be comfortable about sharing that subjectivity with someone else and seeing how it translates.
Beautiful. So people have to, that doesn't sound nice. It helps to get curious and get out of that state of like, what's it going to be? What are my colors? What are my fonts? What should my logo look like? It helps to get, it sounds like really curious and playful.
And this is just me. I'm a curious, playful person, sometimes to my detriment, but as a business owner, it's totally a plus.
Yeah.
And it's really just breaking the boundary of obligation and expectation and allowing yourself and your preferences to come forward. And the more you can do that, the easier it will be. And the reason why I say things like subjectivity and translation is because there's no should, there's no set thing. If I'm like, hey, think of a tree, perhaps you'd think of a pine tree or a little smelly 7-Eleven tree. It doesn't matter, but they're all going to be different. And so getting comfortable with that and being like, nope, this is what I see when I look at this. I like this. It'll give you so much more comfort and confidence when you're moving forward with something for your business.
If you're getting into the nitty gritty, what are some of the first places that you think people could experiment with bringing these visuals in publicly?
Well, that depends on how. Can you redefine the question?
Well, I guess like what I'm picturing is, and then tell me like, or yeah, that could work, is like starting really simple with just playing with fonts, for example.
You could head over to Google Fonts and type in your name. You can even go to Duh Font. I mean, it is like a wild and woolly hellscape from my snobby typographic senses, but it gives you a wide range of style for you to just play around in. It's almost like getting to go to Sephora and try everything of makeup and just being like, ooh,
Yeah.
And perhaps that would stress you out. For me, it's how I got started in graphic design when I was 12.
Mm-hmm.
Downloading fonts.
Playing with fonts and looking at what does your name look like in these different fonts?
What does it feel like? And it's all no, okay, so I say it's all subjective. There are specific industry standards at this point that even if you want to buck that industry standard, the tide is too strong. So if you're using like a fancy font, but you want to be a plumber, it's going to be really sarcastic, and therefore you should lean full in or consider something else that might be more industry appropriate. But still play, because fonts are like one of my favorite things in the world. So I'm pretty biased here. But letters have their own weird communication.
Yeah.
Like a T has no feelings. A T doesn't have to sound like "tuh," but we assign the meaning. We assign what it sounds like, and therefore it has this huge weight of meaning.
Yeah. And then the other thing I think of right away is colors. That it just feels like those could be two places to start playing with your identity visually.
Yeah. And for me, Pinterest sort of wrangles in the choices, because it's like if someone says, "Oh, just be creative," it's like, I need structure. And that's for me. I definitely need the structure. So it's a mix between play, wildness, freeform, and then organizing and structuring, and then back and forth forever. That's the design process.
Okay. That makes sense. What are some mistakes you see wonderful small business owners like therapists making? What are some of the mistakes you see them making visually where you're like, oh?
Well, this is difficult because I understand that everybody has to start somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so the biggest mistake, without being too judgmental in any direction, is staying small, staying with something that works for right now, but clearly you've outgrown or clearly does not give you the presence that your work demands. Using cliche imagery, I'm sorry. I feel this way for the entire medical profession. There's just a way to communicate the same things without showing it.
What about like, and I know I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but like stack of rocks. Like I see so many stacks of rocks.
There's a way to show enclosure. There's a way to show balance. But again, I'm not for everybody, and a deep approach is not for everybody. There are people where when I have tried to get them to go deeper, they've started to cry. And you could see the "I am not enough" face. And it's like, "Oh no, you are. I go really deep, and I'm sorry." You know what I mean? And there's like that weird sensitivity where it's like, I can go so deep. I go to other planets. I'm sorry.
Well, so do therapists. So yeah.
But when it comes to their business, it might not be needed.
Uh-huh.
And that's not a judgment at all. But if you have a vision, if you have a plan, then you need that presence to match the plan. So staying in your comfort zone, staying with things that make you feel good enough, or this'll do, I think is a mistake for any industry. But I have plans.
What do you think are some of the markers for a business owner that maybe they're ready for some branding help? I feel like you're already just starting to kind of go there.
Well, it's sort of, do you know who you want to reach? Do you know how you work? I guess it's questions. It's sort of, how do you know when you're ready to move on, or you feel like a completion in your life? Once you know how your business works and you like your clients and like there's just this dance that comes on, then you want that good beat to support your moves. But people who don't know, people who are just starting out, I feel they need that exploration time. They need I'm just going to type my name out and put my business out there time. So it could be 2 years. It could be 5 years. I would say don't make it 10. I worked with this woman in a small town who stole her logo and used the stolen logo for 30 years.
Oof.
30. And I'm like, woman face, you cannot have this. And so I made her a little illustrated dog, just like something that was legitimately hers. But she is someone who's very happy in her little place, doesn't need to grow, doesn't have the inkling or the ambition to grow farther. That person doesn't need a marketing plan or a giant brand. So she will be happy with the website and the dog logo that I made her until she reincarnates. That's my prediction.
When you feel like, yes, I know what my business is, at least right now, it's always in motion. I know who I want to be working with and I want more of it. So rather than like your branding is going to be the first thing that helps you figure out who you are, it's like your work helps you figure out who you are. And then this helps you express it. At least that's what it was for me. It was, anytime I think that you're working with someone like you're going to learn more about yourself and you're going to, be expressing things you didn't know were there. But I don't think I could have done that process with you. I know I couldn't have done that process with you right when I was starting out.
It's not possible.
It would have been,
The
I don't know.
information, exactly. The information is not present because it's like trying to remember something you don't know.
But do you tell people like this is going to be a deep process? This might get uncomfortable. This might.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah.
You have to.
Yeah.
You have to. Because, I mean, at this point, I've worked with thousands of people. And, nobody's cried in the last couple of years, but there have been people who have cried and people who have shown a lot of resistance. I worked with this woman. Okay. So I worked with this woman who had 3 separate businesses. Each business had its own brand.
Mm-hmm.
And none of them were visually connected. None of them were logistically connected. And it was a ridiculous situation. And so I recognized she needed a branding system, which is the umbrella brand, and all of the little pieces of that brand are a part of that umbrella brand.
So that kind of means that they're all talking to each other. They're all kind of
not disjointed, and it's like, we're not talking about, hardware Mr. Fix-It and fancy stiletto shoes. We're talking about photography, boudoir, lifestyle, and weddings.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like this, it does not compute. So I sat there and we went through the process. She had inspiration. We talked about what she wanted to achieve. But when she looked at the designs, there was such a wall because she didn't like how it looked with her name, but she liked it in the and I'm like, I don't know how to help you with that. Like, you have to be okay with seeing your own name. You have to be okay with but she was not there. And so this was a severe case with, even after like 4 rounds of design, I had to have her photograph her home. And when I saw her home, I knew exactly what the problem was because it was color and pattern. Each room in her house was styled completely different from every other room. And so even though it's one house, this was like the red room with the Dios de los Muertos doll, and this is the emerald room with the Moroccan lights. And it's like, you are an interior designer posing as a photographer. But I utilized that to provide something for her that she was like, yep, this is how I see it. But she could not communicate it. So sometimes I have to override them with like, here's how you're getting in your own way. Hold on. Let me just deliver this to you. And that turned into a very successful project. But it took like 6 months.
Yeah. I bet that people listening are, if they're at home, are kind of like looking around their homes like,
Yep.
What do I have going on here?
Do you have a lot of art? Do you not have a lot of art? Is there a lot of color? Is it minimal? Is it natural? Is it eclectic? These are things that can help. It is my strong belief to say it ought to help, because there can be that disconnect of, I'm a professional, here's how I want you to feel. Oh, it's like when you come to my house, it's like a crazy lived-in comfy palace. It's going to be a completely different feeling, and that's not going to bring in results. So whatever it is, just make sure it is truthful and authentic to what people will actually experience.
Yeah.
In a polished way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you don't have to always be like the top bun and no brush tees with no bra on. But we all know that that is truthful.
Yeah.
You know, there are elements where that is actually a beneficial place for vulnerability.
Yeah. I mean, if it were up to me, which it's not, and it shouldn't be up to me, but I would love it if a lot of therapists had both of those kinds of pictures. I mean, I don't care about the bra part. Like that's none of our business, but the messy hair, the like, what do you actually look like, you know, on a daily basis? And then also a photo that is, you know, polished and kind of putting forward a particular kind of part of yourself. But if it were up to me, I would see people with more than one photo in their website so that people can kind of see different.
And that comes from confidence.
Mm-hmm.
That totally comes from confidence. That your perfection is actually in its imperfection.
Mm-hmm.
And that we all experience that as humans. So embracing that and being okay with that will be so much more powerfully resonant with people.
Yeah.
So much more. I mean, I can't tell you the amount of clients I coach where, I just feel so insecure about doing a Facebook, but write about it, share it, talk about it. Because if you're feeling that way, your clients, your customers, they're also feeling that way.
What does good branding cost?
That is, it's a variable.
Yeah.
You know, and that's like, what does a good smell like? That's going to depend on who you ask. I know I do tiered pricing because it really does matter to me that I help as many people as possible with the gifts that I've been given. So startups pay a different price. Startups in San Francisco pay a different price than startups in Tennessee. They pay a different price than mid-range businesses in Texas pay something different than a guy who buys and sells car dealerships in New York City. So my brands are usually $2,500, but they can range up to $15,000. And it depends on how much work you need me to do. Are we doing it together? Am I doing it by myself? And I don't prefer doing it by myself because it's so personal to you. I mean, I did a brand for a man who was trying to launch a subscription box business, and that cost $20,000, and I hated every minute of it. So even though I'm taking in $3,000 a week, I'm like, ugh, like there's no participation, there's no engagement. It's just like isolation with pictures, and that's not fun.
Yeah, and when you and I worked together, it was like we were having crazy email conversations because you were really trying to understand me, and we got into like the 90s and what about the 90s and what was the music and, you know, all of these things that really led you straight to what ended up working.
Well, it's interesting because that is totally the therapist moment, right? So like, I know I've been in therapy and I'm like, God, I feel 17 right now. And my therapist, God bless her, was like, well, what does that really mean? Like, tell me what that means to you. And then I told her and she was able to help me figure out what was going on. So when people are like, I just like how this picture sums up my photography, and it's a black and white photo of a toddler in a toy airplane and the curtain is blowing in. This is a literal moment I'm describing for you. But the message was sweetness and purity and light and airiness and like a sweet moment that you capture in an impromptu time. And talking with her through that was like, oh, okay. Translation. I mean, scientifically, we don't even see the same color. Let's forget about screen calibration and printing. We will never see the same color. And you can only describe a color using the name of that color. So it's completely irrelevant unless you have a picture and I talk through, well, I see this color, and you will see your version of whatever this is, but we can communicate what I'm seeing there and you can understand that. So it doesn't matter to me. I mean, I designed for Monday Night Football singing George Michael and Madonna because I understood what they wanted to do about this footballness.
So anything else that you want to leave therapists with about this whole branding process that many of them are brand new to? Braha! Didn't even mean to do that. Brand new.
I did develop a fun free game to help people figure out their archetype in a way that was completely off the wall, because I really strive to make these things fun.
Yeah.
They're fun for me, so I will try to make them fun for you.
Yeah.
But it's a Mad Libs type game.
Ooh.
Yeah, so what you put forth your answers without thinking about it, and then depending on your answers, it'll give you some guidelines as to which archetype you can consider and think about. And all the archetypes are written in there. It's like an 8-page report or something, 10-page report. So I can give you the link there.
Excellent. I'm going to put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
And then where are people going to find more about you in general?
Puree Fantastico, which is a wonderful business name to spell on the phone. And then I'm launching my store this summer, which is Puree Craftastico. Really excited about that. And then I'm launching it's a platform. It's a really interactive experience showing design messaging, how it links to film, and how that links to culture, as a way to deal with the things we're talking about in the designers need more ethics and awareness. I'm teaching everyone how to do that.
Amazing.
Yeah, so that should be launched by the summer or early fall. I've been working on that for 12 years.
Cool. Okay, so Puree Fantastico, you're going to find it in the show notes, but it's Puree and then fantastico.com.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being here and helping us understand this and helping make it a little bit less frightening.
I feel grateful because I feel like that is what I'm here to do.
Yay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for everything that you've done for me and my business. Thanks for listening. You can learn more about Jenny Ambrose at pureefantastico.com. So many of you have told me that you want to create something beyond the therapy room, that you want to level up your business to work in new ways and also to make more money, and that you just really don't know where to start and you get overwhelmed by the idea of getting started. You love hearing examples of what Rebel therapists are creating, but then you get overwhelmed when you think about getting started yourself. I created the Rebel Therapist 2-Day for you. This is a 2-day experience with me and a small group of your peers to help you get clear and get started on your own leveling up process. You're going to learn how to clarify your niche for your new offer, identify your leadership style, and begin to craft a pilot version of what you're building so you can get started quickly. You'll also learn to craft your message so it's powerful and true. To learn more about the Rebel 2-Day and apply, head over to rebeltherapist.me and click on Rebel Therapist 2-Day. We're getting started really soon. All right, I will see you next time. So like where I was. Try that again.